Entitled parents gave my brother $50 million while I have a dust gallery. Then I found the secret vault, and they stopped laughing. They laughed when I got the gallery instead of the fortune. Then the FBI showed up, and my brother was the one in handcuffs. While my brother received $50 million, my parents left me their failing art gallery. Enjoy the dust, he said with a giggle. Then I discovered the secret vault of my grandfather. And something that caused my brother to faint was within. Long shadows were created throughout the deserted exhibition area as the last of the sunshine streamed through Mason Gallery's dusty windows. I stood there attempting to take in the events of the previous day while inhaling the familiar smell of old wood and oil paint. Janice Mason is my name, and yesterday I received what my family regarded as their worst letdown. Boston's downtown art gallery is in decline. My memory of the lawyer's office was still clear. The grandfather clock, the massive mahogany desk, and the smugly pricey fragrance of my brother Marcus filled the room. Marcus couldn't suppress his joy as Mr. Harrington read out the contents of our parents' will, which should have been a solemn event. To our son, Marcus Mason, we leave the sum of $50 million, our Hampton estate, and controlling interest in Mason Industries. Mr. Harrington had spoken in a cold, professional tone. To our daughter, Janice, we leave Mason Gallery and its contents. In fact, Marcus had burst out laughing. Finally. Dad always said you get exactly what you deserved, Janice. His Italian leather shoes, his well-tailored suit, and the way he sat in his chair as if he owned the space are all still in my memory. Now, in many respects, he did. The gallery's been losing money for years, he added, looking at his neatly striped nails. But hey, at least you'll have plenty of dust to keep you company. Maybe you can sell pencil sketches to tourists. It turns out that Marcus was correct about the gallery's financial status. For the previous 10 years, Mason Gallery had been having difficulties. Once Boston's leading platform for up-and-coming artists, it has steadily deteriorated into a barely profitable business that most serious collectors ignored. However, Marcus didn't comprehend, and neither did my parents, that I had always noticed something here that they didn't notice. I spent many hours with my grandfather, Gerald Mason, the gallery's founder, growing up in these hallways. Grandpa Gerald educated me about painting as my mother planned Marcus's route to an MBA and my dad was busy preparing him for the family company. True art. The essence of each artwork, not just the price tags and financial potential that my parents were obsessed with. He would say, "Janice, my dear," with his eyes sparkling beneath wire-rimmed glasses. "Remember that true value isn't always visible at first glance. Sometimes the greatest treasures hide in plain sight, waiting for the right person to discover them." I could still hear those remarks as I passed through the main hall of the gallery. Even in its current state, the room was stunning, with high ceilings, traditional crown molding, and large windows that could let in an abundance of natural light when they were clean. However, years of little care had taken their toll. Half of the track lighting had burned out, the walls shouted out for new paint, and the hardwood flooring needed to be refinished. My footsteps reverberated in the quiet as I arrived at the rear office. Although my parents finally turned it into a sterile storage area, this had formerly been my grandfather's haven. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, and everything was covered in dust. However, I could still sense Grandpa Gerald's presence beneath everything. I recalled the stories he used to tell me about the gallery's early years as I ran my fingertips along his old desk, which is now tucked away in a corner and covered in boxes. How, in the 1960s, he transformed it from nothing into a sanctuary for artists who would go on to become legendary. Rumor had it that throughout the years, he had accumulated an amazing private collection. However, nothing noteworthy was ever discovered after his death 15 years ago. Of course, my folks had looked. Persuaded that Grandpa Gerald had stashed away masterpieces worth millions of dollars, they spent months looking through the gallery. They came in appraisers, employed specialists, and even had the walls inspected for secret passageways. They only discovered the gallery's standard stock, which had respectable pieces but nothing noteworthy. They eventually gave up. Due to some residual sense of duty to Grandpa Gerald's memory, the gallery was abandoned and eventually turned into a tax write-off. Instead, they concentrated on Mason Industries, preparing Marcus to carry on the real family tradition. While I worked as a curator at lesser museums and pursued my studies in art history, I shivered as a sharp draft brought me back to the here and now. While I was absorbed in my memories, night had fallen, and the gallery had a new feel in the shadows. The few paintings that were still on show appeared to be watching me with sly eyes, and the shapes of the sculptures cast odd shadows on the walls. I was going to head out when I noticed something. I had never before noticed a small unevenness in the floors close to Grandpa Gerald's desk. I knelt down and rubbed the wood with my hands. There was undoubtedly a problem with the pattern. A slight abnormality that didn't seem to be the effect of age but rather deliberate. As I recalled another of Grandpa Gerald's favorite sayings, my heart began to race. The best hiding place is one that looks like it's trying to hide something else. Over the course of the following hour, I thoroughly examined that floor and its surroundings. I was about to give up until my fingers discovered it. A small lever in the wood, disguised as a knot. I pulled it with shaky hands. The mechanism hardly produced a sound because it was so well built. A thin gap appeared beneath the floorboard as a small piece moved aside. A leather-bound diary with yellowed pages was inside, and one key, which appeared to be far older than the gallery itself. It was my grandfather's journal. I instantly recognized his unique handwriting. These notes, however, were hasty, almost frenzied, full of calculations, doodles, and what appeared to be coded signals. They were not written in his typical flowing style. I looked at one page. It said, "The True Collection. For Janice's eyes only," at the top in bold letters. I turned the page with trembling hands. However, my phone buzzed before I could continue reading. Marcus had texted me. "Meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m., time to discuss selling that dusty gallery of yours. I already have buyers interested in the building." I glanced at the letter and then back at the journal I was holding. What I just discovered was unknown to Marcus. And I intended to maintain it just that way for the time being. I made sure the floor panel was firmly closed before gently putting the journal and key back where they belonged. I felt different as I left the gallery that evening. I had changed the weight of my ostensibly useless inheritance into expectation. I was left more than a struggling gallery by my grandfather. He left me in the dark. And I would start revealing what Grandpa Gerald had kept concealed all those years ago tomorrow, while Marcus planned to strip this home for parts. The key felt more important in my fingers than ever when I secured the front entrance of the gallery. I grinned as I gazed up at the building's graceful exterior, recalling Grandpa Gerald's final words. "Patience, Janice. The best stories take time to unfold." He was correct. This was only the start. The following morning, I got to the gallery well in advance of my 9 a.m. getting together with Marcus. I hardly noticed the deserted halls being tinted in tones of gold by the morning. All I could think about was the secret compartment and what was inside. I knelt down next to Grandpa Gerald's old desk and pressed the hidden mechanism once more. Now the key and diary felt heavy with potential. I located a peaceful spot and started reading. "My dearest Janice," said the opening page. "If you're reading this, you've already proven you have the patience and perception I always saw in you. What I'm about to share must remain our secret. The true legacy of Mason Gallery isn't in its walls, but below them." As I turned the pages, my heart was pounding. The notebook told a remarkable tale that lasted for decades. In addition to running a gallery, Grandpa Gerald had been a member of a group of art preservationists who fought to keep masterpieces safe during difficult times. It seems that the gallery's basement was used for purposes other than storage. A sophisticated network of secret rooms beneath the main floor was depicted in a number of intricate drawings. The diary said that Grandpa Gerald had been covertly altering the building's original foundation for years in order to create a climate-controlled vault that nobody else was aware of. "The key," he said, "opens more than just a door. It opens a legacy I've spent my life building. But be careful, Janice. Others have searched for this collection, and not all of them have honest intentions." I jumped as I heard a harsh knock at the front door. Marcus was standing outside looking impatient. I hastily tucked the journal away and gathered my thoughts before opening the door for him. "Well, if it isn't the curator of dust," he said with a sly smile, walking right by me. "I brought some potential buyers. They're interested in turning this place into luxury condos." Two men in pricey suits stood behind him. They appeared to be developers. They treated the gallery's past like a nuisance that needed to be destroyed and started talking about load-bearing walls and square footage right away. One of them, looking at his tablet, remarked, "The basement would make excellent parking space. According to the original plans, it's mostly unused." I was cold. Should they begin excavating there? "The gallery isn't for sale," I stated. Marcus's expression grew serious. "Don't be ridiculous, Janice. This place is worthless as an art gallery. You can barely pay the utilities." I said no. Marcus lowered his voice and took a step closer. "I know you had some sentimental attachment to Grandpa's little hobby, but it's time to grow up. Take the money and walk away." I slowly looked into his eyes. "Like you did? Taking millions while contributing nothing?" His face reddened. "I earned my inheritance by learning the business, not wasting time listening to an old man's fairy tales about art. Get out." I spoke quietly yet firmly. "All of you," Marcus cautioned, "you're making a mistake," as I led them to the exit. I'm trying to help you. I don't need your kind of help. My heart thumping, I leaned against the wall after they had gone. Marcus was a man who never gave up easily. I have to get things done quickly. I went back to the diary and carefully examined the basement blueprints. According to Grandpa Gerald's notes, the vault's entrance was concealed in the northwest corner of the basement behind a fake wall. If the key was used properly, it would trigger a mechanism. I inhaled deeply before descending the stairs to the basement. It was just as I remembered, rows of metal shelves with decades worth of paperwork, old show materials, and wrapped artworks and sculptures. I saw it differently today, though. I headed for the northwest corner as directed by the logbook. The bare concrete walls met at a straight angle, and it appeared solid at first glance. However, I noticed faint abnormalities in the pattern when I rubbed my fingertips across the surface. What looked like a tiny fracture in the concrete was precisely where the key fit. I turned it with trembling hands in the order recorded in the journal. 1/4 to the left, 3/4 to the right, and then back to the right. Nothing happened for a second. Then I heard it. A faint click, then the murmur of machinery that was hidden. Silently, the artificial wall swung in, exposing a steel door with an advanced electronic keypad. I was also ready for this thanks to the journal. The code was created in a particular manner and was predicated on a crucial date, the day Grandpa Gerald inaugurated the gallery. I meticulously typed the numbers. 1965,412. Climate-controlled air swept over me as the door opened with a soft hiss. I was astounded by the scene that was illuminated by motion-activated lights that flickered on. The vault was enormous, much bigger than it ought to have been. The walls were lined with rows of meticulously conserved paintings, each housed in a specially made cabinet. On pedestals, sculptures were displayed, their shapes creating elaborate shadows. Smaller items, including rare manuscripts, antiquated antiques, and things I knew from my art history coursework but had never anticipated seeing in reality, were displayed in display cases. A plain desk with a letter positioned exactly in the center stood in the midst of the room. My hands trembled as I opened it. Janice, my darling, in the True Mason Gallery, you will find complete documentation for every item in the vault, including its provenance, history, and most importantly, its rightful owners. Some of these pieces were entrusted to me for safekeeping during difficult times, while others were saved from those who would have destroyed them for political or financial gain. What you see around you is the result of a lifetime of work, not just mine, but the efforts of countless others who believed in preserving beauty and history. This collection exists to be safeguarded until the appropriate moment for each piece to return home, not to be sold or showcased for prestige. Because you recognize that art is about sustaining the thread of human creativity that unites us all, rather than about status or price tags, I have selected you for this responsibility. There's a smaller room at the back of the vault, and that collection is different, items I've lawfully acquired over the years, meticulously verified and documented, and those are yours to do with as you please. They should supply more than enough funds to keep the gallery and the vault operating as intended. Be cautious, be patient, and most importantly, be loyal to the role you have been given. With all of my affection, Gerald, Grandpa. I looked at everything in the vault in awe for hours. Works by masters I had only read about, pieces believed to be lost to time, and others whose existence had only been reported made up the astounding collection. I discovered hundreds of carefully chosen pieces by painters whose values had risen dramatically over the years in the private collection Grandpa Gerald had indicated. They are valued at much over $100 million, even by modest estimates. However, it wasn't the cash that made me cry. It was the faith my grandfather had put in me, the legacy he had, without my knowledge, set for me all those years before. The magic was broken by a notification on my phone. Marcus left several missed calls and sent a text message. "This isn't over. You're making a huge mistake." I grinned as I surveyed the vault's precious collection, which my brother would have sold without hesitation. I was absolutely sure of my direction for the first time since I inherited the gallery. I made my way back upstairs and carefully secured the vault. Work needed to be done. The gallery required remodeling. It was time to upgrade security. I also had a legacy to uphold. One thing Marcus was correct about was that this was far from over. However, he was unaware of what he was actually up against. I was suddenly the custodian of something far more valuable than money could buy, while he planned to take what he believed to be a building of little value. I said as I peered up at the gallery's walls, "Thank you, Grandpa Gerald. I won't let you down." The weeks that followed were filled with a lot of activity. I had contractors sign strict confidentiality agreements before I could hire them to restore the gallery's original characteristics. To keep curious onlookers away, the basement was marked as undergoing environmental assessment and remained completely off limits. I read through Grandpa Gerald's journal at night to discover the backstories of every item in the vault. Some had been saved from more recent wars, while others had been saved from Nazi theft during World War II. Every piece of art had a comprehensive file with information on its original owners and the events leading up to my grandfather's possession. Marcus, however, kept his word and wasn't giving up. The legal threats came first. His attorneys sent him a hefty letter demanding an immediate sale, arguing that the gallery's declining state amounted to careless handling of family property. I gave it to my own lawyer, an expert in art law, whom I had discreetly hired with money from the sale of a single small item from my grandfather's private collection. Then came the strain of money. Marcus interfered with the gallery's utility supplies, insurance, and even the property tax assessment by using his contacts. Every time, I used resources he was unaware I possessed to oppose his movements. The pivotal moment occurred on a soggy Tuesday morning. When I got to the gallery, Marcus and two unfamiliar men were waiting. "These gentlemen are from the Boston Historical Society," he replied. He had a razor-sharp smile. "They're very interested in examining the building's original foundation. Apparently, there are concerns about structural integrity." The way they handled themselves and the tiny bulges under their coats made it clear to me right away that they were not from any historical society. They were, at worst, private detectives. I firmly stated, "The gallery is closed for renovations. Any inspections need to be scheduled through proper channels." Among the men, one moved forward. "We have authorization to leave," I interrupted him. "Or I'll call the actual authorities." Marcus stayed after they had gone. "What are you hiding, Janice? There's something in this building worth protecting, isn't there? Something Grandpa Gerald left behind?" "The only thing I'm protecting is this gallery's future," I responded. "Why can't you accept that?" His face grew serious. "Because I know you. You were always his favorite, always listening to his stories. He must have told you something. Let me give you some clues." "The clue is in plain sight, Marcus. You just never cared enough to look." I realized that evening that I needed to expedite my plans. Marcus was becoming desperate, and individuals who are desperate tend to make bad decisions. I meticulously documented everything in the vault for hours on end. Then I called 3 people, the world's foremost authority on art repatriation, a contact at Interpol, and an old friend at the FBI's Art Crime Division. Marcus took action 2 days later. When I heard the basement door open, I was working late. 3 dark-clad males were seen on security cameras heading downstairs. I knew exactly who had sent them, even though Marcus wasn't with them. I calmly pressed the quiet alarm, which was a customized one I'd built that was directly connected to police enforcement, rather than the gallery's standard system. After that, I headed to the basement. The workers were already at the northwest corner, using specialized tools to examine the wall. When I walked in, they hardly gave me a look. I said, "Looking for something?" One snarled, "Lady, just walk away. This doesn't concern you." "Actually," I said with a grin, "it concerns me very much. So do the federal agents who just surrounded the building." Voices burst from above as if on cue. "FBI, this is a federal art crimes investigation. Everyone remains where you are?" What happened next was a haze of activity. The would-be robbers were taken into custody. Marcus was taken up at his house after being located via their phones. Everything was exposed by the search warrants, including his ambitions for the gallery, his hired goons, and even his ties to certain dishonest collectors who dealt in stolen art. The following morning, however, was the true surprise. At the gallery, I had scheduled a special meeting. Officials from several governments were present, as were representatives from museums and cultural organizations worldwide. We went down into the vault together. As the collection was unveiled by the lights, their gasps reverberated off the walls. As long-lost masterpieces were rediscovered, tears were shed. When artifacts that were believed to be destroyed were discovered to be completely preserved, museum directors embraced one another. I gave Grandpa Gerald access to everything, including his meticulous paperwork, documents, and the backstories of how each item had ended up in his custody. We would collaborate over the course of the following year to restore each piece of art to its proper location, bringing the gallery recognition on a global scale for what it gave back rather than what it owned. Marcus, who had lost his freedom and reputation due to his own selfishness, watched it all happen from behind bars. He would have plenty of time to consider his options because the evidence discovered in his house had linked him to other art trafficking enterprises. Regarding the gallery itself, I created a foundation devoted to safeguarding and conserving art in times of war by using a portion of Grandpa Gerald's own collection. The gallery evolved into a hub for activism and education, educating the next generation on the value of cultural heritage. I was standing in the newly remodeled main hall exactly 1 year after I had found the vault, The original architectural details had been brought back to their former splendor, and the room was flooded with light. As Grandpa Gerald had done when he originally founded the gallery, a special exhibition was about to begin, but it would feature works by up-and-coming local artists rather than priceless masterpieces. I have 2 items on my desk in my office, which used to be Grandpa Gerald's haven. His journal, which serves as a reminder of the heritage he left me, is the first. The second is a brief news article from the day Marcus was convicted, which serves as a reminder that genuine value lies in what you choose to preserve rather than what you can take. The Mason name is still used by the gallery, but it now represents something else. A dedication to conserving art for upcoming generations, not merely a family tradition. I sense Grandpa Gerald's presence every day as I pass through these hallways. He would be proud, I'm sure of it. Sometimes, when it's quiet in the gallery late at night, I reflect on how I almost gave up and allowed Marcus to turn this place into just another opulent development when I initially discovered the secret compartment in the floor. But I had learned a lot from Grandpa Gerald. Sometimes the finest riches are hidden from view. Additionally, some items have significantly higher values than their market value. There is no longer anything in the vault beneath the gallery. Although its contents have been returned to their proper locations across the globe, the area is nonetheless prepared in case it is ever needed again. A hidden chamber ready to guard the next historical artifact that needs to be preserved. And occasionally I share Grandpa Gerald's favorite quote with young artists who come to the exhibition with eyes that sparkle with the same fervor I once witnessed in his. True value isn't always visible at first glance. Sometimes the greatest treasures hide in plain sight, waiting for the right person to discover them. They never understand that I'm discussing more than just art. The gallery, which everyone believed to be useless, ended up being valuable not because of its contents but rather because of its legacy of preservation, protection, and the realization that some things are more valuable than all the money in the world. Marcus might have received the money from our parents' estate, but I gained something far more valuable: a goal, a purpose, and the opportunity to demonstrate that sometimes the best form of retaliation isn't getting even but rather doing the right thing. With its windows shining in the sunlight, the Mason Gallery is a tall building in the heart of Boston. It's no longer the dilapidated, dusty place my brother made fun of. It serves as a ray of hope, a defender of culture, and evidence that genuine value frequently extends well beyond appearances. And me, Janice Mason, the letdown who received the useless bequest, is no longer me. I am the guardian of a generation-spanning legacy. The guardian of a custom that prioritizes preservation over financial gain. And the evidence that, if you know where to look, the greatest things in life can occasionally be found shrouded in dust. Thanks for watching and being part of the drama. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a wild news story.